I am a former title producer. I was in the title business for over 10 years. So a little bit of background about Exacta. We started in Miami, Florida in 2004. We've been in Maryland since 2010. Our headquarters is based out of Cleveland, Ohio. We have our own proprietary software system where we can track the crews and also an accounting system for our title company. So it's all inclusive accounting, tracking jobs. Everybody in the company can see every file and all the documentation. So if there's any question, we can upload to the field and things like that. Some other surveyors do lease out our survey stars. We were bought out by an investment firm in 2019 called Summit Park. We acquired Snyder and Associates, which is out of Germantown, 2 years ago, and they've been around for 30 years. And so we've added them to our Maryland, DC market, which is a great addition for us. We have more crews than ever. So surveyors, they use surveyors in all types of different scenarios, including wartime. And so if people go to foreign lands, they will have surveyors go out so they can identify the landscape. As a matter of fact, I was at a crab feast with one of our surveys, and I'm like, "Hey, Bill, how did you get into surveying?" He said, "Through the Army in Vietnam." So he's been around for quite some time. So licensed surveyors, now the guys you see in the field are typically not surveyors. They are field crews. Unless it's a one-man show, Exacta's pretty big. We have 400 employees. In Maryland, we have 10 field crews, 3 surveyors. Our surveyors, 2 of them, one's in Florida, one's in South Carolina, one's Hagerstown. So they're behind the scenes. These are guys, they put their license on the line. They review all the documentations before they stamp that survey. In Maryland and DC and Virginia and Florida, they don't have to have a college education, but they have to sit with a surveyor for 4 years, takes related classes, and take a state exam. They're very technical people. And I asked one of our surveyors, how come, because it's kind of a dying breed. Most surveyors in their mid to late 60s. So I asked our survey, why aren't there as many surveyors around? And it's because civil engineering and surveying is very closely related. Civil engineers have more capacity to make more money and more different fields. So if people are going to study that field, they usually wind up being a civil engineer. So they're mathematically inclined, because these surveys aren't also always a perfect rectangle. Sometimes they have to be problem solvers, like look at adjacent deeds and things like that. So there are kind of different kind of surveys, and we use them interchangeably, but a location drawing is really not considered a survey. It's a plat, and it's basically a drawing. So we're drawing the house improvements like sheds, fences, driveways, patios. We're drawing all those improvements in with the outline of the property. Location drawings, when I started with Exacta 7 years ago, we were at a margin of error of plus or minus 3 feet. Technology's gotten it better. We're down to 1 foot margin of error. So I always tell people, whatever you or your clients are wanting to do, you have to consider that margin of error. If you're getting a fence, you might not want to get a location drawing, because there is that margin of error plus or minus 1 foot. So those are things to consider. Boundary surveys, let me go back just a second. Location drawings, basically 3 or 4 days, we can get them done. Not all of our crews can do boundary surveys. They all start with location drawings, less technical. Our more experienced crews are doing boundaries, much more complex. They take a lot longer. And we're giving you a drawing, and we're also marking property lines. So we're marking the corners of the property. Best to do it if you're getting a fence. And we also do commercial properties in Maryland and DC. Alta is the highest standard of commercial properties. For some reason, like M&T Bank's a big one. They want us to draw in the lighting and the utilities, underground and utilities, if we have documentation for that, and lampposts and other things like that. In Maryland, we can do like single use, like rural farms, 7-Eleven, small strip malls. Big, like White Flint Mall would be a little bit big for us, just because we don't have the capacity. We have the capability, but just not enough crews to handle those kinds of things. So I get this a lot, like location drawings. So unless we have the easement or right of way on the documentation for the deed or subdivision plat, we're not going to draw in those easements, but there could be easements there. Like I share a long driveway. We have a driveway easement. It's not documented, but I couldn't be landlocked because I need to get into my house. I'm at the end of the driveway. So we're going to put easements on if we can find it on public record. There could be easements there that are not noted or have not been recorded. Plastic sheds, we don't consider that real property. If you can knock it over, wooden sheds, vinyl sheds, we're drawing those in. Septic and well, I get a lot. It's not standard operating procedure to put those on the drawings, but we tell people if you want them marked, like I had a guy who was getting geothermal and they wanted them marked so they could see where the septic and well are, we will draw them in, no extra cost, as long as we know beforehand. If we have to go back to the property, of course, we're going to charge for travel times, and it has to be redrafted and approved through the surveyor. So house location drawings for building permits, not always. So we have to put this little note says location drawings is for informational purposes only. Do not rely on it for boundaries or permits or construction. But I have to, a caveat is sometimes they are good enough. For instance, a lot of decks get permits for decks or pools. Location drawings are enough for the counties. We don't know. Every county's different, so we don't keep track of what the requirements are. I always tell people, ask your contractor if they're experienced. They'll know if the location drawings is good enough for the permit, or call the local county. So we have to note that on there. It makes people panic sometimes if they're getting a patio and then they see that on their drawing. We have to put it in per Maryland code. So another thing is if the structure doesn't touch the ground, we're looking at the structures on the ground. We don't draw it in. And a big fence and deck company in Anne Arundel County uses this a lot. And they said, how come you didn't draw that little bump out on that townhouse? Because we're putting a deck all the way across. We don't put anything that doesn't touch the ground. So we did go back out there and remeasure because they needed to see how big that bump out was to go all the way across the deck. So if it doesn't touch the ground, we're not going to draw those little bump outs in. So boundary surveys, like I said, they're precise. We're bearing 12-inch rebar into the ground. So, we try to find metal, that's how we try to, when we first do boundaries. In Maryland, it's not required by law for the builders, even a brand new build, to mark the four corners. So we have to find the existing rebar if we can with metal detectors. And if we don't, then we put our own rebar in and we cap it with our license. So in the future, if anybody has any questions, we're putting little temporary flags where that rebar is buried. Now, some people with fences, they say, hey, I want like an extra midpoint markers so I can have on the right side. So, because sometimes they're not always exactly a straight line. We will do that, whatever they want. We usually charge $25 extra per flag. And that's basically, we're driving that rebar into the ground. Those are the monuments. So boundary surveys versus Ultra. Basically, Ultras are more of a higher standard. Like I said, we're drawing utility lines. And it's basically per the lender. The lender's telling us what they need on that survey for commercial properties. So I have this little form. It's called Educating Your Buyers. Now, it says what's a location drawing and the margin of error, what we're looking for in the field. Boundary surveys are much more complex. I do have some title companies, because I know when I'm a former title person, it's one of the first things they ask. Do you want a survey? Because it does affect title insurance. So, a location drawing or boundary survey. I also have this form in Spanish for your Spanish speaking clients. I have some real estate agents use this in their contract, which is very helpful, as when the title company will know if they want a boundary survey or a location drawing, or neither. So when we get an order, we're uploading SSTAT. That's the first thing we're looking at. We're looking at the short legal description, the deed reference, hopefully the plat reference, the property area. We're uploading all this information into our Survey Stars software system. And the legal description is very important to us. Does it match our findings in the field? Sometimes it doesn't. So we will rewrite legal descriptions. People make mistakes. They turn numbers around and things like that. So we're making sure that the legal description on the deed matches our findings. So actually, this is where I grew up. I grew up in Baltimore County, and I uploaded this because we moved into a brand new house in 1969. But you could see this survey was done in 1959, 10 years before. Now these were all, drawn. These were all brand new houses on Cinder Road. So you could see that they're not all exact rectangles. Some have a slant. The one up on the corner has 5 points to it. So we're uploading this information. So if the crews have any questions about how everything laid out in the neighborhood, they can see this. And then we do the aerial view. We're starting to use aerial drones in different parts of our Florida's starting to use aerial drones. This is kind of an old, because this property now has a fence. But so we're drawing this house. We would draw the house. There's a little driveway. You could see to the right of the property, a sidewalk along the roadway. In the back, there is a concrete patio that we would draw in. In the right corner back is a wooden shed. So we're drawing all those improvements in. And if you see the next door neighbor has a pool, if we were drawing that, we would draw the pool along with the concrete patio and all those impervious improvements. So we're tracking, you can track your surveys as it goes through the process. Is it in drafting? Is it in the field? We also send text notifications because we've had guys that, they go to a property and the seller's like, who are you and why are you here? So now we have text notifications. We will text the real estate agent or any interested parties the night before we're coming to the property. Exacta is going to be coming to the property tomorrow. And then when we're on our way, it's an automatic click over. It's an automated system through our survey stars. When they leave one job and going to the property that we're text notifying, they're going to send another text notification. We're on our way and Ryan's coming to the property and Ryan looks like this. So no more, who's this dude in my backyard, right? Everybody's so informed of who's coming and when we're coming. We've done we've had this for about 1.5 years and it's really worked out well for us. And so, when the guys in the field, they are actually hand drawing the improvements and then uploading all their coordinates with these robotic stations to our drafting team. And their drafting team puts it all together. They color code everything. Some surveys are still doing black and white. We've found that color coding makes it much more user friendly. So like in school, you don't want anything in red because the red, we have this little box, different surveyors call it different things. We call it points of interest. You want none visible. So if there's things in points of interest, you want to make sure that everybody's notified. That's why we like the title company to, they give them plenty of time to review these. So, because sometimes you can fix these things in points of interest. This one, for instance, points of interest, the screen enclosure is over the drainage easement and the public utility easement, which is not good. The shed is over the drainage easement and the shed is also over the property line. So there you go. Those things, you want to make sure that the buyer is aware of these things. And then we put not the full legal description, but on the back of the survey, we're putting a short little legal description on the back. We're making sure they match our findings. And then we have a surveyor's legend. So it makes it very easy, very user-friendly. The boundary line's always in blue. The structures are in green. We even distinguish, what kind of fence it is. A vinyl fence, a wooden fence. There's different lines for all those. Even the concrete or asphalt surfaces, we have different markers for those. And then you could see on the right-hand side, those easements. So those are all the drainage, irrigation, public utility. You don't want anything on those lines because that can affect so many things. And if the utility company needs to come in and replace or remove, they're going to charge you to move whatever structure may be on there. So legal descriptions, and this kind of gets a little dry, but they have evolved like technology. And I am the only one, Maryland, DC market, because with original 13 colonies, we have older legal descriptions than everybody else. Florida is very easy to survey because they're lot and block. We have older legal descriptions. Sometimes we charge more because they're hard to figure out. Like, they used to use like the oak tree to the spring to the creek, and unusual terminology like one pole equals a rod equals a perch equals 16.5 feet. Gets a little tricky. So those are kind of older legal descriptions. Then it kind of evolved to rectangular governmental surveys after 1785, just made it easier to survey, and more precise legals. And then lot and block. Canada also uses lot and block, and that's why Florida and some of the other states south of us are so easy to survey, because of the lot and block legals. Encroachments is a big one. So, the three biggest encroachments, I don't know if anybody can guess: fences, sheds, driveways. Just because a fence is there, don't assume that it's right. Here's one that there was a carport that was added. Look how wrong. They're way off. Somebody didn't do a survey. I had one just a month ago where a buyer got the location drawing on a Tuesday. We're supposed to settle on a Friday. And we noted, even on the location drawing, even with the margin of error of plus or minus 1 foot, that the fence was about 2 feet into the neighboring property. So we notified the title company. The title company notified the seller. The seller said, it's fine. They're friends of ours. That fence has been there. They're fine with that. And the buyer said, I'm not settling until that fence is moved. Because what if somebody else moves in there, not as friendly? They're going to wind up paying for it. So they didn't settle that Friday. I thought that was very smart on the buyer's move to wait and make sure that that was taken care of. People don't always get permits or do the right things or get surveys when they're doing fences. That's the problem. And here's one where the right in the middle of a driveway. So there's things, lots of driveways issues we get all the time. I don't know if anybody heard about this, the famous Ferris wheel in Ocean City in June of 21. It violated the Ocean City zoning code. So it encroached 10 feet over to the Ocean City's property line. So it's not like you can push this big old Ferris wheel down. They had to deconstruct it, cost them $70,000. And actually, I saw the newscast on this, and the mayor of Ocean City said, if you had gotten a survey, you wouldn't have had this problem. So there you go. This is a case study. I do a lot of these classes. I do them for MLTA. I do them for many of the different, probably 7 of the different counties throughout. And one real estate agent told me about her own personal property. And this pool has been there for over 20 years. The pool house was added later, and she did a boundary survey and found out that half the pool and the entire pool house was on a public utility easement. $100,000 title claim. So easements, also called right-of-ways, it allows utility companies or other people to get into your property or to their property. Utility, drainage, driveways, and sidewalks are the most common types of easements. And like I said, we will draw them in if we see them on public record, like the subdivision plats or on the legal description of the deed. And they will be noted in red. So there's different kinds of easements. There's a prescriptive easement. Like I said, I live, I share a long driveway with 3 other houses, and it can't be landlocked. So we have a prescriptive easement driveway to get into my property. Adverse possession, is different because you obtain title, and there's different rules for adverse possession. And I get a couple calls a year about adverse possession cases. It has to be, there have these 5 things. It has to be hostile, not really argumentative, but, going against without permission, Exclusive is, some dude's living in your shed for 5 years or 15 years, and then he moves out and his brother moves in for 5 years. It's got to be exclusive. For Maryland, it's 20 years. For example, Billy and Jamie live next door to each other in Bethesda. There's no dividing fence or boundary between the yard. Billy builds a shed that's actually on Jamie's side of the property, covering about 13 square feet of earth. Jamie doesn't say anything. Billy uses the shed as if it was his own. He does it for 21 years. Under Maryland law, Billy can probably establish that he owns the land on which he was encroaching. Jamie could have stopped Billy by demanding over the 20 years that he remove the shed or sign a rental agreement indicating that it was an arrangement by mutual consent. But Maryland courts will not allow Jamie to kick out Billy after sitting on those rights for over 2 decades. So, and I know most title companies won't take adverse possession cases unless they're, have a law firm connected to them. I do have a couple referrals in Baltimore City that do adverse possession cases. So we get with the title policy, and so location drawings are not good enough for the underwriters to cover survey issues. You have to get a boundary. For instance, that real estate agent in Baltimore County with the pool, luckily she got a boundary survey because that public utility easement encroachment with her pool and the pool house was covered. That means that the underwriter provided attorneys. So they're not going to cover encroachments over the property line, adverse possession by adjacent owners, errors in acreage calculations, undocumented driveways, and things like that. So they're going to give you an exception to title policy with a location drawing only. So this is another thing that we did. I don't know if anybody heard Mike Tyson, his house, actually it was his ex-wife's house, who's Michael Steele's sister, the former lieutenant governor. Anyway, so this house is right on, I like to use the example because it's a custom home right on Congressional Golf Course. Beautiful. We did the location drawing for this, and we did send 2 guys out there because it is so massive. And you can see the aerial of that. So you would think that a custom home builder, we found the utility easements on the property, which were on public record, but the driveway appears to be on the septic and the adjoining property. So, and the concrete parking area is also on the public utility easement. So the buyer was notified about this before settlement, and he's like, well, it's been there for over 20 years. If the utility company has to replace, repair, it's going to be all on the owner. They're going to they have to dig that up or whatever. They're going to be paid for all those. So I like to use that example because it's not just little builders. Some people don't do their due diligence, like, pool permits and things like that. They build and don't consider things that might be affected. I like to say that we also do elevation certificates. These are for your flood zone clients. And basically the lender will tell you, hey, they probably need an elevation certificate. It helps sometimes reduce the insurance rates. Some insurance companies will just go off the FEMA maps, but flood zones change throughout the years. You get more rain than other years, and it does get affected. For instance, this is one where, those poor people in New Orleans get hit all the time. This house was retrofitted. That means that they lifted to reduce their rates. So I have a friend who bought a house in Pasadena, and she's not on the water, but she's the house right behind the water. A house has been sitting there for years. It had a basement, which probably shouldn't have because it's in a flood zone. Her insurance or flood rates were so high. The insurance company says, okay, to reduce your rates, get an elevation certificate, and you can no longer, because every time it rained, it'd come up from the basement, like it would seep into the basement. So they were running dehumidifiers. So they had to pretty much sign a document for the insurance company. They would never use that unfinished basement. They couldn't put furniture, storage, nothing. They had to put a lock on that door. The insurance company came back and took pictures. got the documentation. They also had to put their air conditioning 6 feet off the ground, and it sits on the ledge right off their chimney outside. So those things they do for the elevations are reduced their rates significantly. So that's my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions. That's kind of a short version of what I do for my CE classes.
No, it doesn't look like any questions or anything in the chat here. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the same thing. I don't see any questions, but that's very helpful, Patty. Very helpful. I think for all of us, including participants here. But one of the things you're right. One of the things that we most often see probably is like you said, fences that are mislocated. We see boundary walls are a big one, and particularly in the district, and even on the Maryland side, boundary walls. We get a lot of questions about boundary walls, of course, being in or outside the boundary line. But I would say the most common question probably is, whose fence is that?
Yes.
Right? Who owns the fence? Right? And we published a blog on this a few years ago, and it's not something you can just. It's difficult to explain to people, right? If the fence is serving the interests of both parties in some fashion, then it's a shared fence by common law, right? But that's one that we always get, shared fences.
And the other thing that, people always say, why do I need a survey? Like, why wouldn't you get a survey? So, people are getting home inspections. You want to know what's going on the inside of your house. Is the roof good? Is the air conditioning unit up to speed? So everybody's concerned about the inside of the house. The land's pretty important because, that's surrounding your house. So if there's any issues, I think to be an informed buyer, at least get a location drawing when you're buying a house. You can always upgrade to a boundary survey later, but at least how your land is sitting and how, if there's any things that are going to affect the use of the land, like easements and things like that.
Right. Yeah. And we try to emphasize that from our end, that for home buyers, that's probably one of the most important things you can obtain, prior to closing is get a look at the survey, get a look at the improvements vis-a-vis the boundary lines, but we still have some folks that will opt not to get a survey. But I think it's a bit of a roll of the dice.
Yeah, agree.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Patty. Well, we're going to have this recording available in a couple of days to have it up on our YouTube channel. And if anyone wants to send it along to someone else, feel free. All of our sessions are available in recording mode in our channel. So thank you for attending. Todd or Luke, do you have anything else?
All good. Thanks for your time, Patty. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.